This is Unrendered on IKTV. I'm Tony Regisford and my guest is Professor Verene Shepherd. Professor, welcome to the studios of IKTV and happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Now, I introduced you as a historian of note, and I always admire people who are professors of history or, history sources. The reason being is that I find that memory of dates and events and so on a bit difficult for me. So in school I never really did a lot of history, but now, having reached a ripe old age, I find history very fascinating. So I look at you with great reverence. Tell me something. Let me start out with a very basic question. What is the importance of history, really?
Before I answer that, I would say to you in terms of the dates, I bet you don't forget your birthday.
No.
I don't forget your friend's birthday. And I don't know if you're married, but you wouldn't forget your wife's anniversary or your anniversary.
Well, so I guess it's the significance of it.
So certain dates are important.
Yes.
And even though I don't want people to say that history is all about dates, I want to say that there are certain defining moments in history that we should not forget, like emancipation, independence, that sort of thing. But history is really a story about the past. It's about people's experiences in the past. So when we study history, we're looking at people's experiences in the past.
What drove you to, go into that field, really?
Curiosity. My curiosity about how we came to be in this part of the world. How did we become Caribbean people? And how did we become split into Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago? How did this come about? And who are the people here before us? That curiosity drove me to study history. From the high school,
yes, I was going to ask.
High school, I did it right up to exam level. Then I went to Teachers College. I specialized in history and social studies. I went to the University of the West Indies, and woo, did I become interested in history. Because there I met people like Kamau Brathwaite, Douglas Hall. I read Professor Elsa Govaya. She was there at the time, but I never met her. She was on leave. And I'm thinking, this is what I have been looking for, the explanation about why we are here and what were our experiences.
You would say that history, it was your moment of epiphany then?
Absolutely. Everything.
That's when it came together.
The light turned on.
Yes.
Okay. So that's why we have St. Diego de la Vega, because the Spanish were in Jamaica.
Right.
That's why we have the Kalinago. Oh, they were the first people. So what happened to them? And in school, people would say, so if the Taínos were the first people of Jamaica, where are they? What happened to them? How come we don't see them? So history explains all of that. But it's more than a study of the past. It also tells you or helps to shape your understanding of the present.
Correct.
Because when I say, where are the Taínos? Then I have to get an explanation about the past, about what happened to them. But it helps me to understand present realities. And it helps me, and it should help all people to understand what you should do for the future. It's like a roadmap.
Right.
So you understand the past, you study the past in order to understand the present, in order to map your future.
Of course, it is not always easy to find information about the past because somebody had to have recorded it.
Right.
And they may have recorded their version of it.
Absolutely.
So how do you know the truth? How do you know what is actually factual as opposed to what has been fabricated for serving an agenda? It's
a very good question because, again, there are people who say there are no facts of history. There are perspectives. You see? So your version of what happened to the Kalinago might be different from mine or different from somebody who was writing it because we don't have the history of the Kalinago through the eyes of the Kalinago.
Yes.
We have the petroglyphs and we have some messages from our ancestors, but we don't have their voice.
Their version of what actually happened to them.
Right.
Yes.
And there's an African proverb that says, until the lion tells his tale of the hunt, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
Right.
And that is the kind of history that we have received in the Caribbean because it was written by other people. Now, we have our own historians, and they are questioning the version they inherited. If you were told, for example, that where your ancestors came from was a primitive place. It was backward. Where if you were told that civilization was brought here by Europeans. But you have to question that.
Yeah.
Because when you study the indigenous people and look at their civilization, you'd say, but, or when you think of Mali, Timbuktu, Songhai, all those empires, you say, but no, that is not true. So it's not about fabricating a story that we were all princes and we all came here as kings. We are saying, if we study those civilizations, we will see that when you come
uncivilized
absolutely,
people.
and when you look at what Europe was like at that time, you say, but we were more civilized than they were. If you want to take that hierarchical perspective, or you could just say we were at different stages of development.
But it must be difficult for people who have been exposed to what I would say different perspective, or fabricated, if you want,
or the Eurocentric view.
Or the Eurocentric view, right? And that has been the experience of Caribbean people.
Yes, the Eurocentric view.
It must be a very difficult thing now for professors like yourself, and teachers of history, advocates of that sort of thing, to shift the paradigm.
Yes.
Of the societies that have come up, been brought up on that Eurocentric view.
It's a very difficult project, and it is a project because you have to embark on it and you have to carry it on, and there's no end to it. It's constant education or re-education, okay? So, and how do you convince Caribbean people that the version I'm trying to tell or the perspective that I have is a true perspective? How do you, and it's very difficult, and it's made more difficult because Caribbean history is not a mandatory subject in our schools. So lots of people are coming out of school, even today, not knowing Caribbean history and the true experience of our people.
I'm going to pick you up on that straight away because I wanted to bring that into the program at some stage. In as much as you mentioned it, let me just bring it up now. The fact that Caribbean history is not mandatory in schools here, and I believe it is not in the University of the West Indies.
No.
It is not?
No.
Right.
No.
So what are we doing really?
Good question too.
If that is such an imperative in terms of having people understand their history so that they can understand the present, what are we doing?
I don't know what we're doing. We are, I think, allowing our children to grow up without an identity, without an anchor to their past. And think about it. Most civilizations develop, or most people develop pride about themselves because of what they know about their ancestors and the accomplishments of their ancestors. But so our children need to know not only about their grandparents, but before that, who are their ancestors, and so that's why there's a lobby throughout the Caribbean right now, and that is why I say it's a post-independence imperative for CARICOM leaders to look at Caribbean civilizations and look at what they are doing if they don't adopt a strategy to educate all of us about our past.
Yeah, it would seem to me, Professor, that we're not on the topic of reparations yet, but it would seem to me as if we are taking the reparations issue forward, it would seem to me as if that is one of the things that can be done, even without having the reparations. This is something we can do on our own.
Right.
Basically.
Exactly.
In as much as we brought up the
But it's linked. But it's linked. It's linked because if you're going to convince your people that you must support me on the issue of reparation, or people are going to ask you why, what happened to us in the past, why, what is the basis for reparation, and that can only come by looking at what happened to people.
Right.
And so it is very important. I think there are moves now to, I think some of our ministers of education will say, but we introduce history at the lower levels. They just don't choose it. It's optional at the CXC level. But I'm still saying, by the time they reach grade 9, let's say, if that's where they study their island history and Greek civilization and world history, they still don't know enough about the Caribbean. So those who defend it by saying, but they do some history up to grade 9, and then they choose, but they don't know enough from up to grade 9 to be able to know if they would like it or not. if they don't do enough of Caribbean history. They do a broad world history, world civilization.
Right. So
and they might do some country history.
It's not focused enough.
They could leave there not knowing anything about the Middle Passage.
I remember speaking to Prime Minister Gonsalves, who again is a person who's an avid historian. And he was saying to me, if he was teaching history in schools, for example, he would take the children on a lot of field trips.
Absolutely.
I don't know the resources are there to do that because those things are resource driven. But the fact that you can actually go to sites, I'm sure Jamaica has them, all the Caribbean,
everywhere,
where you can actually go to a site and speak about what happened here.
Right.
You know, that certainly must make history more.
We must take the children out of the classroom some more. And it cannot be that expensive because it's within your own country. You can take them to the sites within your own country. It would be great if you could take them outside, say to another country.
Yeah, but even within your own country I'm talking about.
Yesterday, for the first time, I went to Fort Charlotte. I mean, I'm telling you, it was great to be there. And to hear Dr. Adrian Fraser explain to me, absolutely,
you know, and where the guns are pointing inwards.
This is what blew me away.
Yeah, you know,
everywhere around the Caribbean you go where there's a fort, the cannons are pointed towards the sea, protecting from outside. Look at here, the cannons, and it's like it reminds me of turning in on ourselves. You know, it's like a metaphor for what's happening in our region. We're turning in on ourselves.
So, I mean, that's something really and truly that I would challenge you and the reparations people.
And I went to see the Chateauer obelisk, and I would like to go and see at Layou, and the petroglyphs and so on. I would like to see things like that because the children would then be convinced we did have indigenous people.
Exactly, and that's what I think is missing from getting that interest in history.
Which means you want to educate the teachers as well. You have to turn on the teachers to history.
But let's roll back again now to history. I want to ask you about the importance of archaeology and its linkage to history. Because, you know, one side you are looking at facts and or perspectives, but they're physical things that can probably substantiate certain theories that you may come up with.
And I think that's why at Mona, the department's name was changed from just the Department of History to the Department of History and Archaeology. And we have accommodated within the department the archaeology program because the Mona campus is on a plantation, a former plantation, the Mona plantation, and it also borders Papine plantation. When the archaeologists do a dig and they excavate the remains of our ancestors and they find their material culture that they can actually put in a museum and show people, then history comes alive. And in fact, so that is the physical evidence you need to be able to understand the narrative you're constructing.
How much of that is happening across the Caribbean?
A lot of it is happening.
So there's
a lot of archaeology. I mean, there's underwater archaeology as well. Yes. Because, for example, Port Royal, the city sank in 1692. So there's a whole city underneath, part of the city underneath.
Right.
So you have people diving and looking and trying to bring up artifacts and so on. So a lot of archaeology is going on. In Barbados, we have also an archaeology department, and our children and our people can now see. They have seen shackles that were buried and have been excavated. They have the ceramic from the indigenous people, a lot. So it helps historians to understand the past, because remember, not everything was written down. So you have to then interpret the artifacts that you're seeing. Yes. So you have documents in the archives, but you also have the physical, the material culture, the visual evidence. Yes. And you have the plantation houses too. That's a visual evidence of the brutality.
It certainly is. Professor, we're at the end of the first segment, so let's continue the conversation when we come back from the break. This is Unrendered. My guest is Professor Verene Shepherd. More when we come back from the break.